Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm very happy to be here with you tonight to check in with you, to have yet another one of our great late night conversations. That's not as late as it has been in the past, but 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Got an echo. There we go. But it should be a good chat tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. It's going to be a great conversation here tonight. The way we do it is the way we always do it. I give my opening remarks, which is whatever it is I want to talk about, whatever, is the topic for this evening. And then from there, I answer your questions for the rest of the night. But in between the question section and the opening remarks, we do a roll call. We find out who's on the other side of the camera. So it's opening remarks, roll call, and then me answering your questions. And in case you're wondering, I take questions. Tonight we're on Rumble, Rockfin, and YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, send me a super chat to ask your question. If you are on Rumble, send me a Rumble rant to ask your question. And if you are on YouTube, or if you're on Rockfin, send me a Rockfin tip to ask your question. And please make the second half of the show exciting. Ask me some good questions in the second half of our show. And quick announcement for those of you who may not be aware, we are having a retreat. We are having a national educational workshop for the Center for Political Innovation, a 4-day gathering in Vermont. And it's coming up at the end of April 26th through 29th. I'm gonna be at that retreat, and so will a number of great people from our organization, our president, Elizabeth Young, other people that are part of our great organization. So come, we'd like you to be there. If you want to spend 4 days with other anti-imperialists, getting to know people, please attend. There's a link down below in the description about how to attend, and you can also sign up. Here's the link in the chat. This is the link where you can register. I'll drop it in the chat of all the different platforms, Rumble, Rockfin, and YouTube. But we'd really like to have you there. So if you can go ahead and register, then we'll know that you want to attend. Our president, Elizabeth Young, will give you a call, follow up with you. But please join us. We would love to have you there. If you're curious about what our group is about, or if you're a member of the group and you want to meet other people from the group, or for whatever reason, it's going to be a nice 4 days in Vermont. I know a lot of people are flying to New York because it's way cheaper than flying to Vermont. So we have a van leaving from New York, and we can help you with your travel plans, help you figure out how to make your travel plans. A lot of people are booking their flights to New York, and then we have a van from New York. We're figuring that out. Other people are just driving directly there. Some people are flying to Montreal because it's pretty close. But regardless, it's in Vermont, 4 days, April 26th through 29th. And it's going to be good. So be there, register. We'd love to have you there to get to know our organization and what it's all about. Thanks, everybody, for that announcement. And let me remind you all once again, the way that this program works is I give my opening remarks, and then we do a roll call to find out who's on the other side of the camera, who's watching. And then from there, after I do the roll call, we then answer people's super chat questions for the rest of the night. That's the way it works. Now, I am going to make this camera a little bit higher tonight. because I feel like you should get a better angle. So there we go. It's a little bit higher. I'm even going to make it a little bit higher than that. I am going to make it a little bit higher. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Now we're up very, very high. Very high. I'm staring up at the camera, which is the way that it should be. So I encourage people to do what R.W. Emerson just did. Ask me a question. Give me something to talk about in the second half of the program. It could be whatever's on your mind, but it would be appreciated. So I'm going to jump into my opening remarks for tonight. And, last night I mentioned passingly that today being Good Friday for Catholics and Protestants, Good Friday is in May for Orthodox Christians. And I know a very large percentage of our audience are Orthodox Christians. And, you're all, and some of them live in Russia, some of them live in America. And I consider you to be my Christian brothers. But for those of us who are Catholic or Protestant, today is Good Friday. And I mentioned in passing in last night's stream that I was considering talking about religion and getting religious on today's stream. And I didn't know if that was the right thing to do, because every time I get religious on these streams, I get a very mixed reaction. There are some people that just don't like it. They just don't like it. They just don't want to hear it. And I don't feel that such people shouldn't be welcome in CPI. I don't feel that people that have religious differences with me, that feel that I am wrong for believing in God or wrong for the way I believe in God, I don't feel those people should be made to feel unwelcome. I don't feel that they should be considered less part of our community just because they have a different perspective on these things. And I don't want to make those folks uncomfortable. So part of me was wondering if I should get religious tonight. And I voiced my concerns on the stream the other night. And I got to tell you, 3 different people said to me, Caleb, get religious. Caleb, just go ahead. Just go ahead with it. So I thought, okay, I am just going to go ahead with it. I am going to get very religious tonight in my opening remarks. And if you don't like that, I don't like you less. We're still friends, but maybe if this is going to upset you or bother you, maybe you shouldn't listen tonight. And let me point out, mind you, there are certain other personalities that would never say that. Right? I am honestly telling you here tonight, if religion bothers you, if religion upsets you, if religion is something that you have a lot of painful memories associated with, don't listen. I am not going to live or die by the view count of these streams. I have said many times, I don't care about how many numbers there are. And that's not completely honest. I do care a little bit, but I feel a need to talk the way I'm going to talk. And if this is not your cup of tea, don't feel obligated to listen. You know what I mean? You don't have to listen, right? It might be tonight you should go, read a book or go take a bath or go call your grandma who you haven't talked to in a few years or something like that. And I'm saying that. And the reason that I'm saying that, actually, it's funny. I didn't think I would say this, but it's just coming to me now. And that's what's amazing about these streams. I don't always come on here with a clear plan. I gave a little bit of thought to what I was going to say tonight, but what I'm about to say is coming to me in this moment as I'm saying this, as I'm giving this little disclaimer and warning you that this is going to be a religious stream. I'm realizing why I'm doing it. And that is because I was once one of the people who would be triggered and offended by such a stream. And I'm not saying that in a condescending way. I'm not saying that in a way that's like, oh, I just used to be like you. And then I'm not saying it that way. Because when I was an atheist, nothing annoyed me more than the condescending answers I got from people who were Christians when I told them I was an atheist. I will never forget the number of times that I told somebody when I was in my late teens or early 20s, and I told them I didn't believe in God, and they said to me, "Oh, did you get hurt in the church?" And that made me angry because it's a condescending question. And I said I would get angry when people would say that to me, because I would say, no, maybe I just read some books. Maybe I just don't think the Bible is literally true. Maybe I just don't believe. Maybe you don't have to psychoanalyze me to determine that I disagree with you. Maybe what you believe isn't the default position that everyone should have. And I really took offense to that question when people would say, "Oh, did you get hurt in the church?" And I would get very, very angry. Because what if I was? What if I wasn't? It doesn't matter, right? And I got to tell you, part of the reason that I was an atheist, and part of the reason that I was not just an atheist, but I was triggered by Christianity, was because I lived in a really small town where everybody was religious. And for a lot of people, their religion had a very shallow quality to it. Their religion reflected not thinking outside of the small town. And it was very annoying to me. It was things like that, right? I mean, I could tell you many stories, but for me, I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was a member of a communist group, and we did a lot of activism around police brutality. And I was in my early 20s. I was in college, and because of our activism, because we were working with certain Black ministers in Cleveland around the issue of police brutality, we ended up going to a church service. And it was the first time I had been to a church service since I had graduated from high school. And I remember standing in the pew with my fellow communists who were also atheists, except for one of them, I think, but most of them, two of them were atheists at least. And I remember sitting there and standing in the pews, standing up for the hymns and sitting down and being angry, and just being angry because I had so many memories associated with religion that were negative. And with arguments I would have with people about religion where I felt condescended to. And so I remember I really didn't want to be there. I really, really didn't want to be in that pew in that moment. Because of my memories, because of where I was in life. And this is something that I've come to realize, and it's taken me years to realize this, but the journey is sometimes just as important as the destination. I could not be a Christian the way I am now if I had not become an atheist first. Just like I could not be an admirer of Stalin and the Soviet Union the way I am now if I had not been a Trotskyist first. That your personality and who you are is a sum of all the people around you. And it's the sum of your past experiences. And sometimes, not just sometimes, a lot of times, you have to experience things in order to understand reality. And in order to experience things, you have to be in a different place, and that knowledge builds on itself, and life experiences build on themselves. And so, I don't think that me being an atheist from the time I was 15, 16 years old to the time until I was 27, I don't think that was an accident. I think that was part of God's plan for me. And that God needed me to be an atheist for a while so that I could really be a Christian. And that might sound crazy and insane, but that is what I have come to believe. And so if you are an atheist right now, I don't hold that against you, because for all that I know, that could be God's plan for you as well. And it's not my job to interfere with it. And it's not my job to grab you and shake you and try to convince you to believe exactly what I believe. And it is not my job to make you uncomfortable and make you try to digest something that you are not ready to digest. It's not my job. So if you're the kind of person that gets angry by hearing religious things, I respect that, because I was once you, and I'm not condescending toward you. And I don't think that I know something you don't know. And I don't think that I am smarter than you. That's not it. Right? I think that if you are an atheist right now, that's because of your life circumstances. That's because of the way you see the world at this time. That's because of the way you understand things. And it's based on your experience and your knowledge. And you may change at some point, or you may not. And I don't see you as less than me because of that. And that's what I'm trying to communicate to you. I don't see you as less than me. I don't see you as less experienced than I am. I see you as where you are in your life. You are on your journey, just like I'm on my journey. And where you are in your journey right now has you being an atheist. And where I am in my journey right now has taken me from Christianity when I was a kid to atheism and back to God. And I respect your right to have your journey the way it's going to happen. Now, I don't think that it's beyond your control. I do think that your will and your conscious activity has a lot to do with determining your faith journey, etc. So I'm not saying that it's all just completely in the hands of someone else. But what I am saying is that I don't feel a need to condescend to you. And I don't really think some guy on YouTube is going to convert you either, right? And it's not really the duty of a guy on YouTube to convince you to believe in God. If you do want to get into the world of Christian apologetics and debating, there are many YouTube channels and debates and videos arguing about whether or not God exists, arguing about fine points of religion, Christianity versus Judaism, atheism versus Islam, Christianity versus Islam. I mean, you can watch debates for hours. You can do nothing but that. And if you're looking for that kind of content, be my guest, right? There are hours and hours and hours of videos in which people who are religious debate atheists, in which people that are atheists debate religious people, in which different religions debate each other about fine points of their religion. I'm not here to do any of that. I am here to speak to those of you who watch this YouTube channel, which is mainly about anti-imperialism and communism. And I am here to speak to you, my audience, about my faith and how my faith translates into being a communist. And so I actually want to start out this stream with a challenge. It's a challenge. Take it or leave it. This is a challenge to the Christians who are watching this channel. This is a challenge to the atheists watching this channel. This is a challenge to the Jews and Muslims and Hindus and pagans watching this channel. This is a challenge. And it's something that you can do on your own. And it is very easy to do. I have here, this is my King James Bible. But this isn't just any King James Bible, right? I bought this Bible when I was taking a train from Washington, D.C. to New York City, and I wanted to read the Bible on the train. And they had only one Bible in Grand Central Station, in Union Station, in Washington, D.C. And this was the one. It was the King James Bible. It's a King James Bible, but what's special about this King James Bible, there's many Bibles like this, is that the actual words spoken by Jesus are in red, right? The actual words spoken by Jesus Christ are in red, right? The narration, the other words of other people are in black, but the words of Jesus are in red. It's not hard to get a Bible like this. You can get them at a Bible like this at any bookstore. Any bookstore, Barnes and Noble. You can probably get one at Walmart, right? Especially if you're in the Midwest. Maybe it'll be a little harder in New York City or California, but in the Midwest, go to Barnes and Noble, go to a store that sells, flowers and Christmas cards, and it's not hard to get one of these. And go and read the red. That is my challenge to you. Because, there's not that much red in the book, right? The whole Old Testament is in black. Most of the New Testament, the epistles and the letters, right? So the Bible, you got the Old Testament, which is all the stuff that the Torah and the founding of Israel and the judges, and skip the Old Testament, go to the New Testament, and you got the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which are accounts of the life of Jesus. You've got the book of Acts, which is about the founding of the church. And then after that, you've got the epistles, which are letters written by the Apostle Paul that kind of argue about, how the church was being set up. And then you have the book of Revelation, the Revelation to John. So really, the only books that you're going to have Jesus's actual words are going to be the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Not that long. And I challenge anyone watching this stream, anyone, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, atheist, Hindu, pagan, whatever you are, get a Bible like this and read the red part. And when you read the red part, I don't want you to think about what the Pope said. I don't want you to think about what some pastor said. I don't want you to think about your experience with the church. I don't want you to think about what your family told you. I don't want you to think about what Christians have said to you. I don't want you to think about even anything that you know. Just forget everything that you know. Forget everything that you know. All your biases, and just read the red part. Just read the red part. Imagine that you have no idea who's talking. You have no idea about what's happened for the last 2,000 years. You have no idea what a Catholic or a Protestant is. You have no idea what a Muslim is. You have just forget everything. Wipe your mind completely clean and just read the red. And if you can do that, if you can just read the red, You're not even reading the story of Jesus' life. You're just reading what the man said. Nothing else. You're just reading his words. Once you do that, you will have no reason for me to explain to you why one can be a Christian and a communist. You won't need to hear a word that I have to say. Live streams like this, where I'm trying to explain to you that even though Christianity and communism have been considered enemies, but actually, you won't ever have to hear any of this. If you just read what the man said, you'll get it. It'll snap. It'll make perfect sense to you. You'll read what the man said and you'll go, oh, duh. Of course Caleb is a Christian. Of course you can be a Christian and a communist. Why didn't I? You'll get it. Read what the man said. Read the words in red. And if you read the words in red, you will understand why I am both a Christian and a communist. And it will make perfect sense to you, and you'll get it. Because I got to tell you, I love this book. I love this book. I've been having this book read to me since I was a child. And I love this book. And I love the words in red. And the words in red have been ingrained in my soul. Probably while I was still in the womb, I was hearing the words in red. And when I was a child, I went to church every Sunday, and the words in red have been stamped into my soul. And I love the words in red. But if there's one thing I don't like, it's when people tell me what they think the words in red said. Because I have heard so many people who think that they know what the words in red said, but they don't. For example, what is one of the rallying cries of religious conservatives? What is one of the things that religious conservatives talk about constantly? Family values. Family values. Family values. Christians love family values. Well, I'm not against family values, right? People who love their children, parents who love their kids, kids who love their parents. You know, I'm not against family values. But go and read the words in red. Did Jesus preach family values? No. Jesus did not preach family values. He made some comments about divorce not being good. But over and over again, Jesus said, leave your family. He said, a man's enemies will be those of his own household. And that he's come to set a son at variance against his father, and a father at variance against his son, and a daughter against her mother, and a mother against her daughter. And he said the most beloved people will be those who leave their families, who turn and abandon their families because they know it's the right thing to do for faith. Those are the ones who are going to be loved the most. These are not family values. Over and over again, in every gospel, he says to his followers, you are going to lose your family members because of me. Your family is going to turn against you. Your family is going to abandon you. Your family are going to become your enemies because you believe in me, because you know what's right. And that's great. And that's what you should do. That's not family values. That is not family values. Okay? And so when I hear Christians going on and on about, oh, the family is sacred and all of that, I mean, that's not what Jesus said at all. He said over and over again, your family is going to get in the way of doing what is right. Your family is going to challenge you. Your family is going to hold you back. Your family is potentially going to take you to hell. And if your family gets in the way, abandon them. Now, I'm not telling you to abandon your family. I'm certainly not telling you that. And he never said it was required. But the idea that, show me the verses where Jesus says the family is sacred, where Jesus says that, the family is eternal. He doesn't say that. He does not say that. He says some negative things about divorce. He talks about, about lust and sexual immorality. He does not talk about, So we'll start there. But there's many examples of Jesus saying things that don't sound like what Christians do. And that brings me to a quote from an atheist. I'm going to put a quote from a very famous atheist on the screen. And this is actually a man who was not only an atheist. This man did not believe that Jesus existed. Most atheists believe that there was a historical Jesus, but the atheist that I'm about to put on the screen, Vladimir Lenin, was of the belief that Jesus was a mythological figure, that he did not exist. Lenin was what they called a mythicist, meaning that he did not accept the validity of a historical Jesus. But this is what Vladimir Lenin said. This is the opening, if I can find it, hold on. This is the opening of The State and Revolution, one of Lenin's most important books that he wrote at the time of the Russian Revolution. This is the very first paragraph of that book. This is what Lenin said. During the lifetime of great revolutionaries, the oppressing classes constantly hounded them, received their theories with the most savage malice, the most furious hatred, and the most unscrupulous campaigns of lies and slander. After their death, attempts are made to convert them into harmless icons, to canonize them, to say, and to hallow their names to a certain extent for the consolation of the oppressed classes, and with the object of duping the latter, while at the same time robbing the revolutionary theory of its substance and blunting its revolutionary edge and vulgarizing it. Today, the bourgeoisie and the opportunists within the labor movement concur in this doctrine of Marxism. They omit, obscure, or distort the revolutionary side of this theory, its revolutionary soul. Now, think about those words. I think those words are very, very true. And I think we can all point to examples of where what Lenin is talking about in this quote happened. Right? Obviously, the fact that the Black Panthers are now loved by the woke people. And there's documentaries about the Black Panthers on PBS, and there's murals of them in most major cities. But we know that Fred Hampton, the leader of the Black Panthers, was murdered by the FBI. We know that the FBI viciously persecuted the Black Panthers, but now they're turned into harmless icons. We know Dr. Martin Luther King was considered to be a dangerous radical and a subversive, yet they've made a national holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Even though in his final years he advocated socialism, he started talking about U.S. imperialism in Vietnam, etc. But I want you to pay attention to the words that Vladimir Lenin, an atheist, uses when talking about how they distort the lives of revolutionary figures. He says, after their deaths, attempts are made to convert them into harmless icons. Now, Lenin was a Russian, and in Russia, icons are a religious item, right? When we say icon, we just mean, what does icon mean in standard English, right? We'll just pull that up. Icon, right? An icon, um, an icon is a person or thing regarded as a symbol of veneration. However, in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, an icon is a sacred object. It is a painting of Jesus Christ or another holy figure, typically in the style on wood, venerated and used as an aid of devotion, right? And then icons have a very sacred purpose in Russian Orthodox Christianity, which I do not fully understand as a Protestant. But the fact that Lenin is using the phrase icon, the word icon there is not, it has different meaning. It has a cultural significance. He says, after their death, attempts are made to convert them into harmless icons, to canonize them. Now, what does canonize mean? What does canonize mean? Canonize, definition. Canonize, officially declare to be a saint. There you go. To turn them into harmless icons, to canonize them, and to say, to hallow their names to a certain extent, to hallow their names. What does hallow mean? To hallow their name, to bless, consecrate, or render holy by means of religious rite. So he says that they're turning revolutionaries into icons. They're turning them into saints, canonizing them. They're hallowing them, blessing, consecrating, or rendering holy by means of religious rite. For the consolation of the oppressed classes, but with the object of duping the latter, while at the same time robbing the revolutionary theory of its substance and blunting its revolutionary edge and vulgarizing it. And then he goes on, they omit, obscure, or distort the revolutionary side of this theory, its revolutionary soul. Now, that quote from Lenin, where he's talking about how revolutionary figures, after their death, are turned into harmless icons, and how their teachings are stripped of its revolutionary soul. I think that what Vladimir Lenin wrote is so true for Jesus Christ and so true for Christianity. I mean, it's beyond anything I can even express to you tonight. If Jesus were alive today, I don't think he would even recognize many of the people who speak in his name. I don't think he would even understand or comprehend how people could do such things in his name. I read the Gospels when I was a kid. I had them read to me. And every time I heard Jesus's words, I would feel oomph. I would feel a level of passion and energy because I knew, even though I didn't know, I was too young to know, I knew I was listening to a revolutionary. I was listening to somebody who lived the kind of life that I someday wanted to live. I was listening to somebody who fought against injustice. I was listening to somebody who couldn't bear injustice. You know, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. Because there are some people who can just go along with it. They can see hungry children and it doesn't bother them. They can know that a war happened which was based on lies and doesn't bother them. They can see Julian Assange being tortured simply for allowing the truth about our government's criminal activities to be brought to light, and it doesn't faze them. Jesus Christ was not one of those people. Jesus spent his life almost trying to contain himself, trying to hold himself in so he could do what he was meant to do. But you can see that Jesus Christ was boiling with passion. Boiling with passion because he knew too much. He knew about this world and how absolutely wrong it was. He knew far more than any of us know how wrong the world was. The Gospels tell of how Jesus, when he was a small child, I think he was 12 years old, his parents went to the city of Jerusalem with him, and he got lost. They couldn't find him. And then they found him. And where was Jesus? He was in the temple, debating all the top religious scholars of the day. This 12-year-old boy. His parents go on a trip to the big city, Jerusalem. Their kid's lost and they can't find him. And then they go to the most important place. And he's there debating and teaching the smartest and most well-educated priests and religious scholars of the day. Now, can you imagine how frustrating it would be for somebody with that level of knowledge to even be able to talk to those men? Can you imagine how frustrating it would be for him to interact with people in everyday life, to hear people say things where they have no idea what they're talking about, to hear people talk at him? This is somebody who could argue and debate and hold his own against the top religious scholars of the time. The most well-respected theologians are sitting down and he's having a back and forth with them as if he's one of them. He's teaching them. He's educating them. He's debating them. Can you imagine how Jesus felt when he heard people say everyday dumb shit? He must have so many times slapped himself. You know, there's a good friend of mine years ago, we had a movie screening, and we showed the movie The Battleship Potemkin, which is an old Soviet movie from the Soviet Union. It's a silent movie about, a revolutionary uprising among some sailors. And it's one of the well-known Bolshevik Soviet propaganda films from 1927. It's black and white. It's a silent movie, has captions. It's a great movie. You go and watch The Battleship Potemkin. So I showed the movie, and there was a good crowd of people there. 10, 20 people were there. After the movie ended, there was a young man, bless his heart, as Southerners say. He raised his hand and he said, "How did the Bolsheviks get the camera into the ship? How did they know to film everything while the uprising was happening on the ship?" And I said to him, "Well, they didn't. This is a movie that they made after the revolution." And he said, "Well, then why is it in black and white?" And I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was funny. Hey, some people, they just don't get it. And, this guy, he saw a black and white silent film of sailors rising up, and it was old. And so he assumed this was actual footage from the Russian Revolution. And then, when I said, "Well, this was with actors," he said, "Why did they make it in black and white?" He was lost. And what's funny is that I just thought it was funny. I laughed about it. I still laugh about it. I've got a smile on my face. But there's a friend of mine. There was a friend of mine who did not think that was funny. He was mad about it for weeks. 3 weeks later, I kid you not, I was with this friend of mine, and he was looking out the window. And he had this angry look on his face. And I'm like, what's on your mind, man? And he said, "You remember that guy who thought the movie was actual footage?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, it was funny." He's like, "No." He's like, "You know how some kids, they just can't understand that cartoons aren't real?" And he was really angry about this. It really bothered him that someone could be so out of it that they wouldn't understand. He was genuinely angry. Why? Because this friend of mine was a very intelligent person. He was a very smart guy. But he'd grown up around people who weren't so smart and intelligent. I think he'd been incarcerated. He'd been in prison. And that at many points in his life, he'd been surrounded by people who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And it just made him angry. Well, I think, this guy, saying the stupid thing he said about, why is it in black and white, etc. It triggered him. It reminded him of so many instances where he's heard people say really, really dumb shit. And it just made him angry. But if you think about that, Jesus must have felt that way his entire life. If Jesus was 12 years old and he was able to debate the greatest scholars and the greatest religious leaders of his time, he must have been walking around feeling like my friend, looking out the window. Aren't there some kids who just can't understand the cartoon? Jesus must have felt that way his entire life. And that anger, that frustration that Jesus had, wasn't a vengeful anger. He didn't want to hurt people. But the frustration and the disappointment that he felt, it came across many, many times. We know that he went to the temple in Jerusalem as an adult, and he saw all these people buying and selling. He saw a marketplace environment. And he screamed in rage. And he said, "You have turned my father's house into a den of thieves." And he turned over the tables, and he made a whip, a scourge, a whip, and he started beating people and driving them out of the temple with this whip. He was so angry to see them buying and selling in the temple in God's house. There's other stories that come across if you read the Gospels. I talked about Jesus and family values. At one point in the Gospels, in multiple Gospels, it tells the story of one day Jesus was teaching. He was teaching to a crowd of thousands of people. And they all wanted access to him. They all wanted to talk to him. But then some of the disciples came up to him and they said, "Hey, Jesus, your mother is here. Your mother's here. She wants to talk to you." Mary was there and wanted to talk to him. And I'll pull up. I'll find it, Yes, it's Mark 3:31. Mark 3:31. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and your brothers are looking for you." "Who are my mother and brothers?" he asked. And then he looked at those seated in the circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother, sister, and mother." Well, that was a diss. That was a diss. I mean, that wasn't simply a statement of, "Oh, if you were religious with me, you're in my family." No, that was a diss. He wasn't just saying the people who follow me are my family. He's saying those people, my blood relatives, they are not my family, is what he was saying. He was saying, they said to him, "Your mother and brothers want to see you." And he said, "My mother and brothers are the people that are here that are actually supporting me and supporting what I'm doing in my life. And those people that you just mentioned, my mother and brothers, the ones that aren't following me, the ones that aren't supporting my ministry, that's not who they are. My mother and brothers are the people in this room." You have to remember, traditional family structures and blood connections were much more important in these times. Families were a lot closer. And he didn't say this privately. He said this in front of lots of people. If you can take from that particular passage, you can read what was said there. It's pretty clear that Jesus was angry with his mother and brothers because they were not supporting his ministry. They were not supporting the movement he was building. And he didn't appreciate them showing up. And, you almost wonder if Jesus's mother and brothers, maybe they didn't support him at the beginning. But then when they saw the crowds, suddenly they wanted to be with their famous brother, their famous son, Jesus. You almost have to wonder if when Jesus was a carpenter, and he said to his father Joseph, and he said to his mother Mary, he said, "You know what? This isn't what God wants me to do. God wants me to be preaching. I have a message from God. I have to go out and preach. I'm not going to be a carpenter anymore." And they said, "Excuse me? You went through an apprenticeship? You learned to be a carpenter? And you're just going to go out and start talking to people? You're just going to go out and start preaching and hope that you can support yourself that way? Are you out of your mind?" And he said, "This is what I'm going to do." And you have to wonder if Jesus's mother and brothers said, "Don't do that. You're a fool. Don't do that. Just be a carpenter. Just be a carpenter. Stick to carpentry. You're good at it. It's a family skill. Your father was a great carpenter. You're very good at carpentry. Just stick to being a carpenter." And Jesus said, "No, that's not God's plan for me." And he went out and preached. And then, when there's huge crowds gathered around him, when Jesus is the talk of the town, when Jesus is the most exciting thing that's happened in Jerusalem in years, all of a sudden, Jesus's mothers and brothers, they want to be right next to Jesus. They want everyone to know, that's my son. That's my brother, Jesus Christ. And so Jesus is preaching to this crowd of thousands of people, and all of a sudden they run up, "Hey, Jesus, your mother and brother are here." And you can imagine that Jesus is thinking, "Oh, now I'm your mother and brother. Now you support my ministry." And those words that he says to them, "Who are my mother and brother?" he asked. And then he looked at those seated in the circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and my mother." At that point, he's digging his mother and brother. He's saying to them, "You didn't support me. You didn't do God's will. You're not with me like these people are. These people believe in me and are around me. You were not with me." That's what he's saying. Right? This is something that Christians debate. It's a theological concept. It's called Christology. And there are different levels. If you think Jesus was a God on earth, had no human qualities, you have what's called a high Christology. And if you think that Jesus was not divine, you have a low Christology. And Christian denominations and Christian scholars, they have different levels of Christology. And I am of a low Christology. I do believe that Jesus was the Messiah. I do believe that he was the Son of God. But I believe that Jesus did have very human qualities. And we see those human qualities come across in various moments in the Bible. They come across. We see Jesus very much coming across as a human, coming across as someone who suffered, coming across as somebody who knew that things didn't have to be the way they are and was pained by the way they are. We see him coming across as someone who is outraged about injustice. We see him coming across as somebody who wanted to change the world. That's what we see. But I want to get to Good Friday, because that's what today is. It's Good Friday. Because when we talk about the crucifixion, when we talk about Easter, when we talk about the resurrection, we're talking about something that has a power to it power that we really don't understand. We might think we know it. We might think we can understand it. We might think we can relate to it. But it hits us on a level that we really can't explain. You see the image on a crucifix of Jesus dying, wearing barely any clothing, in pain, nailed to a cross, suffering in that kind of agony, meeting such a horrific end, a death that none of us would want to experience. An amount of physical pain, emotional humiliation, exhaustion, physical exhaustion. We see that. We see that image. And we say, that's our God. That's our Savior. You know, we don't have an image of our God as being all powerful. We don't have an image of our God as being some kind of superhuman who could never be vanquished and defeated. No, we have an image of a man suffering the worst persecution, the worst torment, the worst agony, the worst humiliation and degradation and abuse. I mean, just the worst scenario that a human being could possibly ever go through. And we look at that, we say that's our God. We say that's our Savior. That's our Messiah. And that points to something that gives me a reason to wake up in the morning. And that points to something that gives me a reason to fight for socialism. And that points to something that enables me to keep going when I'm disappointed with the world. Because Jesus, he stands for the fact that justice will prevail. He stands for the fact that as awful and as horrific as it gets, and as intolerable as conditions become, and as much evil surrounds us every day, there is something more powerful than that evil. There is something more powerful than Satan. There is something more powerful than our human flaws and humanity. There's something in this universe that transcends the material realm. There's something mighty. There's something strong. There is something that we cannot touch with our fingers, that we can't calculate with mathematics. There's something that we can't feel with our hands or see with our eyes. There is something that exists in a non-material way that can redeem us all. There is something powerful that we in our human existence cannot understand. There is something out there that is stronger than anything that we can even know. And you could find that in his words. You can find that in the red. You can find it. And one of the things that I am the most thankful of, despite my flaws, despite all the mistakes I've made in my life, despite all the times I've let myself down or let others down, despite everything that I have done, despite all the ways that I am imperfect, despite all the ways that I have failed to fulfill God's plan for me, despite all the ways that I have not measured up, despite all of that, there's hope for me. And there's hope for you. And there's hope for all of us. Because in our existence as human beings, we're full of sin, full of selfishness, full of pride, full of arrogance, full of vengefulness, full of mean-spiritedness. All of us human beings, there's something out there that's not human. There's something out there that's not material. There's something out there that we can't calculate in a scientific way or a mathematical way. There is something out there that can redeem us. There's something that gives us the ability to get beyond. To get beyond the flaws that we have. There's a friend of mine who told a story a couple weeks ago, and it stuck with me. It's about a month ago I heard this story. And the friend talked about how there was an old woman, a grandmother, and she had saved up a lot of money to go on a really nice vacation with her grandchildren. And it was on a cruise ship. She was going to go on this cruise ship that had a lot of nice water rides and things with her grandchildren. But then at the last minute, her grandchildren were not able to come. They were able to get the money back on their tickets, but she ended up on that cruise that she thought she'd be on with her grandchildren. She ended up on that cruise by herself. The grandkids weren't there. And she spent the time that she was on that cruise absolutely miserable. Because everywhere she went, she would imagine that her grandchildren were there with her. Everything she did, she was thinking about, if only my grandchildren were here, it would be like this. If only my grandchildren were here, it would be like that. And she was alone on this cruise. And the whole trip, the absence of the grandchildren that she loved being there was just hammered home into her mind. And what should have been a very joyful, fun vacation was a very miserable, miserable moment. And I heard that story. And it was told to me that that is how God feels every day when he sees us, when he sees humanity. Because we have not lived according to God's plan. We have been given special godlike creative powers. We are the only species that can interact with the universe, the only species with creative power, the only species that can make the environment serve us. We're not animals. Animals are just going through the motions, but we have free will. We have intelligence and we have creativity, but we went the other way. And every day God looks at us and he sees how much better things would be if we could live his way, if we were building heaven on earth with God. We were living as God meant for us to live. If we were doing things as it had been planned to do, it would be so much better. And God sees us And he sees the world, and he sees the wars and the death and the destruction. And he sees the hungry children. And he sees broken homes and families. And he sees people hurting other people, people being indifferent to other people's suffering. And he sees that. And he says, this isn't what I made you to do. This isn't who you were meant to be. This was not my plan. This is not how it's supposed to be. And it breaks God's heart every day to see what this world is. But he doesn't hate us. He doesn't blame us for it. He doesn't want to violently punish us. He believes that we'll come back. He believes that we will come back. And he knows that we will come back. And he knows it's not going to be easy for us to come back. And he knows that he can't make us come back. We'll only come back when we're ready for it. And when we've been through a lot. And when we've been through difficult experiences. And when forces that he started work themselves out gradually over the course of time, we will come back to God. We will have a world without inequality and without suffering, without injustice. We will have a world where people are kind to one another. We will have a world without all the horrors that we've seen. We will get there eventually. And he knows that. And he's sad that we turned away from him. And he's sad that we didn't build that world with him. And he's sad that we had to get lost in the wilderness. And he's sad. He's disappointed. But he knows far better than any of us that it's going to work itself out. And that we'll be back. And that things will be as they are supposed to be. You know, I'll just end this way. If you read this book, the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelations, it's a scary book with all kinds of scary dragons and killing and death and the 7 thises and the 8 that's, and it's the whore of Babylon. It's all kinds of awful stuff. But then in the very, very last chapter of the last book of the Bible, he gives it all away. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert for humanity. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. He gives it all away. And he tells us where we're all going. He tells us what it's all about. He tells us how it all ends. He says, and he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. And in the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, there was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of nations. and there shall be no more curse. So on that note, folks, those are my opening remarks for tonight. Names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations, names and locations. Alex Rickel is in Oregon. Welcome, Alex. Hashtag no more curse. Tyler in Missouri is saying Christ is king. Frazier says it's 2 a.m. in the United Kingdom. Bob in Troy, New York. JT24 in Mississippi. Jenny in Cincinnati. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Oh, got to scroll up. They're coming in fast. Brandon, St. Louis, Missouri, also says Christ is king. We got Nick from Norway. We got AKA Dionysus Larson. We got Colorado, Underhill. Jamie in St. Paul. Laura in San Antonio, Texas. Sam from Missouri. Sage from Milwaukee. California Delta. David in San Jose, California. Very good. Names and locations. Names and locations. All right. We got David Rennie in Hamilton, Ontario. John McCarthy in Chicago. Ryan in Kansas City. Silver Wolf, Austin, Texas. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Ottawa, works in progress. Michael in the Republic of Texas. Argentina. Billy in Gateshead, England. Briggy in Pennsylvania. Christ is Lord from Clark, New Jersey. Alex from Brazil. Alberto in Tokyo. Billy Kane in Gateshead, England. Alex in Brazil. Tuned in from Denver. Patrick in Maine. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got anyone on the Rumble? Anyone on the Rumble with us? I see. All right. I see Hempcar is on the Rockfin. All righty. All righty, folks. Very, very good. We got Dan from Southern California. So very, very, very good. Very, very, very good. Sarah in Saitama, Japan. Easter Sunday here in Australia already. Wow. I mean, it's just Friday night here. There you go. All right. Alexandria, Egypt. Chris in April in Salt Lake City. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All righty. All righty, folks. So, we've got some super chats here to answer. I do appreciate the super chats. They help me, they not only get me talking here in the second half of our show, but they also enable me to pay my bills and, make sure I can afford this extra studio room that, here in my New York City apartment where the rent is too damn high. Let me add that I do appreciate people not feeding the trolls. Just don't feed the trolls. It's weird when trolls pay money, to insult me or get my attention. But, we've been through so much in our community that, at this point, I am heeding the advice of people in the Center for Political Innovation who care about me, who want to see our community grow. I'm heeding their advice and trying to just rise above it all and to just not engage because we've got important shit to do. And, we've got stuff to do. And I do appreciate people not paying attention to the trolls because at this point we've been through so much. They've hit us with so much that, we just keep going. So, yeah. Thanks, folks, for everything that you all do. And I'm going to start answering people's questions. Can you address the Spartacist League, the one Trotskyist tendency that was strongly pro-Soviet and anti-imperialist? Does it still exist? Well, I thought that the Spartacist League didn't exist because they hadn't had an issue of their paper come out for a couple years. But I was wrong. They about maybe a year ago, they had a public event. They do exist. Jim Robertson, the founder of the Spartacist League, died. Um, Jim Robertson, the founder of the Spartacist League, died, and they're not. I mean, if you want to get technical about it, right? The Spartacist League wasn't the only Trotskyist group to support the Soviet Union. The Workers' World Party had Trotskyist roots. They defended the Soviet Union until the end. And I don't know if the Spartacist League supported the Soviet Union because they were highly critical of it. And they seemed to, they very much thought that the counter-revolutions that were sweeping Eastern Europe were good things. They even sent their members to East Germany to participate in them, from what I understand. The Spartacist League is a Trotskyite group that was formed in 1966. It was a guy named James Robertson led a group of followers to leave the Socialist Workers' Party. And they are probably the most famous Orthodox Trotskyist organization. The Spartacists are notorious for disrupting other people's events. They were notorious for getting into fistfights with other communist organizations. And they had some off-the-wall beliefs. Legalizing pedophilia was one of their beliefs. They advocated legalization of child rape, basically legalizing pedophilia. They advocated, they said some weird things like World War II is still going on and stuff. They're just a weird fringe Trotskyite organization. So, I mean, I did for a long time subscribe to their paper. I would renew my subscription if I got a chance because I did enjoy it. The articles that they wrote about the Civil War were always very educational. And the articles that they wrote about the history of political organizing were good, but I view them as just a fringe sectarian, ultra-leftist organization. I don't know what to say about them. I will say I did see something once at one of their events. And I saw it, and I don't just blame them for this, because this is every communist group out there. This is why we had to form the Center for Political Innovation, because all the communist groups are like this. But I will never forget one time I was in Chicago years ago. This is at least a decade ago. I was in Chicago, and I was at a study meeting that was put on by the youth wing of the Spartacist League, right? And one of their younger members, who was like a young, she was like in her 20s, and she was kind of a feminist. I think she had like a feminist tattoo on her arm. And she introduced herself and all that. And she asked me where I was from. I said, I'm from Cleveland. And she said, my band used to played a couple shows in Cleveland. And I said to her, oh, you're in a band? And then this older man in his 70s, who was one of the leaders of the group, looked over at her and said, didn't we talk about this? In this like stern voice. She said, oh yeah, my band played in Cleveland. And this older man says to her in this very stern voice, didn't we talk about this? And then she looks over at me nervously. Oh, I used to be in a band. And I was like, oh, okay. And whatever was going on there was not healthy. Whatever was going on there was not right. I don't know why she had to pretend she wasn't in a band anymore. Or she used to be in a band. I don't know what was going on there, but that reeked of unhealthy organization to me. That reeked of something's not right. And I tell folks, look, there's a lot of good people in a lot of these communist groups who mean well, but every communist group that I'm aware of has some big problems and stuff like that. Like, one example, I've told people many times, if you want to know the problem that most communist groups in the United States have, think about this. A young person, someone in their early 20s, late teens, is volunteering for the Democratic Party. or the Republican Party or the Green Party or the Libertarian Party, and they say to their other party members, their other Democrats or Republicans or Greens or Libertarians, and they say, someday I want to run for president. I want to be the Democrat nominee for president. I want to be the Republican nominee for president. I want to be the Libertarian or the Green Party nominee for president. The response that the young person will get will be great. Wow. That'll be the response, because we're so happy that a young person is enthusiastic and is, has high aspirations. That's normal. However, in any communist organization, and I do thank you for the super chat. Thank you, Mihutch, and I'll address you during the discussion period. Any communist group in the United States that I'm aware of, I mean, there's a few exceptions, but, for the most part, any of the major communist groups, the Workers' World Party, the PSL, the Revolutionary Communist Party, the Communist Party USA, the Socialist Workers' Party, any of the communist groups in the United States, if a young person comes around and they're involved and they say to the leaders of the group, or to other people in the group, someday I'd like to be the candidate for president for this organization, the response to them will be, what? You think you're better than the leaders of our group? Why, you've only been in this group for a year, but I've been in this group for 40 years. Our leaders are so much better than you. Who do you think you are? And especially if it's Party of Socialism and Liberation, it'll be, you as a white man would want to, all the communist groups are like this. They're all like this. It's weird as hell. And it's sad. But, all the communist groups are like this. If you come in and you have ambition and you want to really do something, you're going to be viewed as competing with the leaders of the group. And they are going to view you as arrogant and needing to be put in your place. It's nuts. It's insane. And I view this as the result of a couple things. The main thing it's the result of is that these organizations have all been, just completely under attack. These groups have been completely under attack for years, right? And the world has moved so far. In the 1970s and even in the early 80s, it looked like the world was moving in the communist direction. And then late 80s, early 90s, it clearly looked like it was moving in the other direction. And these groups all endured decades of the world going exactly the opposite of the way that they thought it would go. And a lot of people quit. And a lot of people went elsewhere, and holding on required, at least in the United States, which is a very anti-communist country where communism has not been a mass movement since the 1950s, really. I mean, maybe not even really. There hasn't been a mass communist moving, and there hasn't been a mass communist movement in the United States in decades. And because of that, these groups have all kind of retreated internally. And certain people have made these groups their source of validation. I think another problem is the way that Leninism has been interpreted. Right? Because the Bolsheviks very much were an organization that had many great leaders in it. And democratic centralism was a mechanism for getting all of their strength to combine, to get them to march as one. But unfortunately, for many people in the global communist movement, there's been a feeling that the what democratic centralism means is that there can only be one smart person in a group. And because of that, these groups, they splinter and they become little cults of personality. And anyone who knows anything about CPI, I am always trying to get other people to do stuff. Always. I am always trying to get other people to write articles and give speeches and do stuff. I am not trying to hog the spotlight for myself. I want more people in the group who can do stuff. And all the people in the group that do stuff, I appreciate it. I don't want to hold people back. I don't want to, but a lot of these groups, they've been defeated over the years. They become very, very, I don't know what the right word is. They've become very, very, isolated and fractured, and certain people, I remember years ago, I had trouble recruiting, to the Workers' World Party because the members in Cleveland that I was working with didn't want to expand the group because they were afraid of the group not being their little club anymore, right? It had been 4 people for 20 years, and Tyler knows it more than anybody, it had been 4 people for like 20 years, and here I am, and I was willing to, they were willing to let me join, but everyone I recruited was not willing to submit to them in ways that I would. And it was very hard to expand the organization. So CPI, we're the Center for Political Innovation because now is the time to innovate. None of these groups have the answer. And the communist world has changed. It has largely changed. The communist world has changed a lot in the last few decades, right? And there is a global anti-imperialist socialist camp, but it is not like it was during the Soviet years. And if you can't recognize that, you're not tied to existing social forces, which a lot of these communist groups are not. A lot of these communist groups are living in the past. And, look at what China is doing today. Look at what Venezuela is doing today. Look at what Vietnam is doing today. Look at what the actual communist countries of the world are doing today, right? And they're doing that for a reason. And if you think they can all just go back to the Soviet way, or they should all just go back to Trotsky's permanent revolution or something, you're deluding yourself, right? There is real socialism in the world today. And imperialism is still the enemy of humanity, and it's gripped by a big crisis. But the world has changed, and we need innovation more than ever. All right. Throwing out Christianity because American Christian groups is like throwing out communism because of that exactly fits what I was just saying. There you go. There you go, Gavin. That exactly fits what I'm saying. That exactly fits. And that was kind of the point of what, my opening remarks were trying to say. I was trying to get people to think about things in a different way. And I hope that I spoke to some people here tonight. Looks like I did. So there you go. There you go. All right. When I hear about Jesus's trials at the end, I think about Julian Assange. Yeah. Absolutely. 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 And yeah. I thought of Pontius Pilate when I think about it. It seems like nobody wants to be the one that actually is responsible for handing him over to the United States. They give him more appeals. They're doing everything because everybody knows that what they're doing to Julian Assange is wrong. And no one wants to go down in history as the person who did this to Julian Assange. So that's all I can say about that. So there we go. All right. Mihutch accepted the challenge. So he's going to read the red. And then he also said, thank you for sharing your testimony. And I appreciate that, Mihutch. I'm doing my best. This was interesting. I didn't think I would do it exactly like I did it tonight. But that's the good thing about this, right? Is sometimes I come on here with a full prepared speech. And tonight I prepared a little bit. I thought about what I might say. But I also winged it a little bit too. And it went very, very well. It went very, very well. And I'm really glad I did it the way I did it tonight. And I'll be back. I'm doing these streams a lot more frequently. So Yeah. For some reason, I'm extremely tired. I think this stream tonight took a lot out of me, right? I feel very, very tired from tonight's stream, which is interesting, but I guess I had a lot I needed to say, and I found the words to say it, and that's very satisfying. Oh, wow, we have another one. Congregants at my church all work for 3-letter agencies. Okay. After his death, the pastor gave a misty-eyed sermon about Navalny. Should I find a new church? Well, let me put it this way. I don't think what you should get from your religion is necessarily what you should get from politics. You know, and that, as much as I view being an anti-imperialist and being a communist as very connected with my faith, I feel like one could be part of a faith community. One could be part of a faith community that had people in it that saw politics differently than you did. I don't necessarily think that what you want to get from your faith community is the same as what you want to get from a political organization. It can be the same, and it can overlap. But I think that's up to you. You have to make that question. You have to think about, what does this church give me? Number one, what does this church, why am I here? Am I fulfilling what I'm supposed to do in this church? And do the politics that I'm hearing and the people that I'm sitting in pews with, do they detract from what I'm supposed to be doing? Would I be happier elsewhere? I think that's just a journey you have to go on yourself, right? I want to work with people of all different religious perspectives: Christians, Muslims, Jews, atheists, Catholics, Protestants, or whatever. And I know there are many people that I work with politically who are in churches with people that I would never work with politically, they would never work with politically, but they're able to find spiritual expression in the same way. So, I think you have to wrangle with that on your own. But I think that it's very possible for people with opposite political views to worship together. I think it's very possible. And maybe this means that you have a job to do. Maybe you're in that church for a reason, to expose people to the other side of the story. Maybe instead of leaving that church, you should be in that church to tell people what they need to hear. And maybe you're in that church for a reason. I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, I don't know. You have to figure that out on your own, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you have to figure it out on your own. But the fact that your pastor gave a misty-eyed sermon about Navalny, like, he wouldn't have done that if it didn't occur to him. He thinks that's a consensus. He thinks everybody thinks that. And that's the problem in the United States, is a lot of people, it never occurs to them that people would hate Navalny. It never occurs to the people. It never occurs to them that people might like Putin. Never occurs to them that there's another side of the story. So your job, maybe not at your church, but maybe, is to tell people that there's another way to see these events. Your job is to make these people aware of the other side of the story. Because a pastor, in my experience, if his church are all Republicans, he might get up and give a sermon about the greatness of the Republican Party. But if there's at least 10% Democrats, he's not going to do that. Right? If there's a pastor and, he's got a congregation, his church is not against abortion, it's neutral, and there's a good 10, 20% of the people there who think abortion should be legal, he's not going to get up and give a pro-life sermon. So your pastor wouldn't have given that sermon if he didn't assume that everyone there already agreed with him. And so I think you need to find a way to let the people at your church know that there's another side to the story. And that might not be easy. And you definitely shouldn't do it in a way that's just going to offend them and make everyone your enemy. But people need to know. People live in a bubble where they assume that everyone agrees with U.S. imperialism. Everyone agrees with mainstream media. Well, no, they don't. No, they don't. And so, to have somebody like you who knows that Navalny wasn't a good dude in that church, maybe you have a political role to play. Maybe you're there to show people the other side of the story, but maybe not. You have to figure that out. Can you debunk Douglas McGregor's anti-communist rant? No, I can't. Because Douglas McGregor is one of the few people in the United States right now who's not beating the drums of war against Russia. And I'm at the point, folks, where I have seen way too much mudslinging among different people that are on the right side of the issues. Douglas McGregor wants to free Julian Assange. Douglas McGregor wants to, de-escalate and stop sending weapons to Ukraine. Douglas McGregor probably doesn't agree with me about a shit ton, but I don't feel a need to fight with Douglas McGregor, and that we have this culture on the internet where everybody disagrees with everybody else. Everyone fights with everybody else. And, among people who are anti-imperialist, who are on the right side, of Julian Assange, of war with Russia and all of that, why should we quibble? I would love if we could have an event sometime where Douglas McGregor came and spoke about why we need to de-escalate with Russia, why we need to reindustrialize the United States. Maybe at some point, Douglas McGregor and I could have a friendly conversation about the 20th century and about communism. And I could, set him straight on some issues. But at this point, look, it's not about whether you call yourself a communist. This is what I really want people to understand. There are loads of people, and I said this last night, and I've said it over and over again. There are loads of people in America who call themselves communists, who are on the opposite side of me of every issue. And there are loads of people who don't call themselves communists. They're on the right side. All right. To me, being a communist means fighting imperialism. It means this global system of monopoly capitalism that is grinding countries into poverty, that is leading us toward a new world war and a low-wage police state. That system must be opposed. For me, being a communist is about fighting imperialism. But for a lot of other people, it's about all kinds of other shit. It's about worker cooperatives. It's about LGBT. It's about feminism. It's about, having a picture of Lenin. It's about, that's not where I'm at. I'm fighting imperialism. My understanding of communism, of Marxism, Leninism, is that imperialism is the main danger. In our epoch, it is about opposing imperialism. And I am with the anti-imperialist forces, and I'm against imperialism. And that means that I will work with people who are against imperialism. And that means that just because someone calls themselves a communist doesn't mean I have any loyalty to them, right? And a lot of the people who call themselves communists are not anti-imperialist. There's a lot of people who call themselves communists that were mourning Navalny. There's a lot of people that call themselves communists that hate Russia, that repeat war propaganda against Russia, that want to send more weapons to Ukraine. There are all kinds of people who call themselves communists who hate China, all kinds of people who call themselves communists who hate the working class. I've even had people who call themselves communists tell me working class is a white supremacist code word. I don't know how anyone can be a Marxist and think that. I thought the whole point was about the proletariat or whatever, but I have been told by Marxists that working class is a white supremacist code word by woke Marxists. These labels don't matter. What matters is which side are you on. And, this isn't the first time it's been like this. In the lead up to World War II, there were two communist factions in the world. The biggest one was the Communist Party and the Communist International, and they supported Roosevelt and they supported Stalin and the Soviet Union. They were against Hitler. And then there was this other communist faction that didn't support the Soviet Union and thought Stalin was an evil dictator. and didn't support Roosevelt and thought that the Popular Front and aligning with Roosevelt was a sellout and a betrayal. And when France got invaded, this particular faction said plague on both your houses and actually attacked the French Communist Party for trying to defend the homeland from the Nazi invaders. And both of these factions called themselves communists, and both of them quoted Marx and Lenin, but one faction was the Communist International, led by Stalin, and the other faction was the Fourth International, led by Trotsky. And they were on opposite sides of World War II. And Trotskyites will tell you, no, they weren't, blah, blah, blah. They were, right? They were on the fascist side of World War II. They said they were neutral, but they were actively trying to break apart the Popular Front, actively trying to demobilize the fight against fascism. But the Trotskyites called themselves communists. They quoted Lenin. They talked about, in their minds, they were more revolutionary. The Communist Party was watering it down. They were the true revolutionaries. But there were two communist factions, and a major world war broke out, and Stalin was on one side, and Trotsky was on the other. So this isn't the first time that this has happened. And right now in our time, right, the world is polarizing very quickly. And the communist world is on one side. Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela, the Donetsk People's Republic, Lugansk People's Republic, Belarus. They're on one side. And there are these people in Western countries who call themselves communists, who have pink and purple hair and are obsessed with the transgender issue and want to put all Trump supporters in prison camps. They're on the other side. So, what you call yourself, what label you put on yourself is not the issue. The issue is what side are you on? I'm trying to think of an example. There's a strike going on. There's a union that's on strike. And there's a couple scabs who they say, well, the union's not communist, so I'm going to scab on this strike. I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to try to break the union because the union's not communist. They might call themselves communists, and they might have quotes. They might have quotes from Marx and Lenin about sellout reformist labor unions to justify what they're doing. But when it gets down to it, they're scabbing on the strike and you're supporting it. And there might be people in that union that are very anti-communist that are walking the picket lines with you. And they're on the same side of that strike as you are. They hate communism. And then these scabs who said, well, the labor union's not communist, but they're on the opposite side. That's kind of where we're at. And the communist movement has always been like that, right? The Mensheviks during the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution happened. And a big section of the people that were opposing the Russian Revolution called themselves Marxists. There was the Bolsheviks. They were the Communist Party led by Lenin. Then there was the Mensheviks. And the Mensheviks, they quoted Marx and Lenin up and down, backwards and forwards. They called themselves socialists. They called themselves Marxists. But they were on the wrong side. And there were a lot of people on the Bolshevik side who didn't believe in communism. But they knew the Bolsheviks wanted to stop World War I. They knew the Bolsheviks wanted to redistribute the land. They didn't know anything about communism. This is how our movement has always been. It's how our movement has always been. We've never had the position that if someone calls themselves a communist, it is our duty to be loyal to them. We have had the position that we are on the side of the forces that are opposing imperialism. That's always been our position. And if you read Lenin's writings, and if you read everything that happened in the lead up to World War I, Lenin is ranting and raving about how World War I would never have happened if it wasn't for communists who sold out and supported it. And our job is to not please And this is another thing that people don't get, right? We don't care what other communists think. Why should we care? Our job is to go lower and deeper to the real masses. That's our job. When the other communists have lost their way, not our problem. Our job isn't to go to the other communists and shake them and get them to be right. No. Our job is to go lower and deeper to the real masses. And that has always been the position. We don't want left unity. We want communist and revolutionary anti-imperialist unity with the masses of people. That's what we want. We don't want left unity, right? And we expect that the bulk of people, when it really gets down to it, there's a lot of people who talk a good game. There's a lot of people who talk tough, but when the moment hits, when the rubber meets the road, they're all, what they used to say with cowboys, they're all hat and no cattle. They're all hat and they're no cattle, right? They don't have it in them. And that's always been that way. Always, right? The whole history of our movement is like that. There's people that can read all the right books, can talk the right way, but when the strike happens, when the revolution happens, when the persecution starts, when the witch hunts and the House Un-American Activities Committee come, then all of a sudden, oh, they're out of there. And so why is it that these people that betray us, they call themselves communists. Meanwhile, every time that happens, every time the sellouts flee and abandon us, McCarthyism, the strike, the revolution, there's always people who are not communists that are on the right side. Did you know that? There are always people who are not communists, who don't call themselves communists, who are on the right side. In every revolution, every strike during McCarthyism, there were people who were not communists that said, I'm not going to disown my family member, and stood against the FBI. Albert Einstein was somewhat sympathetic to the Soviet Union, but he wasn't a communist, but he donated to the Communist Party's defense fund. There were civil libertarians. There were Christian groups that even defended the Communist Party. They said, we don't agree with them, but they shouldn't face this kind of persecution. So there's non-communists who can be on the right side. And there's always loads of communists who don't have it in them. Right. And I think in our age nowadays, it's especially true. A lot of people that are communists are just communists on the internet. The idea of actually doing anything about this, actually building an organization, actually getting anything done is like no comprendo. They don't understand it. So that's something. Look, I mean, if you the red flag, I don't know if you ever heard, this is one of the most famous communist anthems in Britain. Right. It's to the same tune as Oh Christmas Tree, but the people's flag is deepest red, it shrouded off our martyr dead, and ere their limbs grew stiff and cold, their hearts blood-eyed its every fold. But then the chorus is, then raise the scarlet standard high, within its shade we live and die, though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we'll keep the red flag flying here. Right? We expect this. So Tucker Carlson, great example. Tucker Carlson supports the Uhuru movement, folks. Tucker Carlson went and interviewed Putin. I have more in common with Tucker Carlson than I do with 90% of the people who call themselves communists in the West. And these people that call themselves communists but hate Tucker Carlson, people who call themselves communists but ain't doing shit for Uhuru and don't rally to support Uhuru. What good does it mean to call yourself a communist? Right? What good does it mean to call yourself a communist if you're not on the side of Uhuru, if you're not supporting Russia in Donbass right now? I mean, who cares if you call yourself a communist, right? So I think I've made my point, but there you go. All righty. So no, I'm not going to go after Douglas MacArthur or McGregor. Not a good use of my time. All right. What you said about communist groups living in the past reminds me of the movie Blast from the Past, where they emerge from a bomb shelter. It's like that. It can be like that. And again, we should just forget these groups exist. Lower and deeper to the real masses. I tell people tunnel vision. And especially in the age of the internet, tunnel vision is very, very important because there's just so much, so much distraction. And I'm learning, I'm doing a better job every day of just ignoring it and focusing on our work because it's all meaningless bullshit. It really is. And I'm just telling you, there's going to be a time coming soon where none of that's going to matter. When the crisis becomes very intense, which it will. I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist. Things are going to get worse. The storm is coming. And when the storm comes, your social media reputation will not matter. And the amount of likes and shares you've got will not matter. All that will matter is what organization you have built. And organizations require relationships with people who may not agree with each other, who can get shit done. Chris says, I would say that Putin is anti-imperialist. You think? He rescued Russia from the looting of the fall of the Soviet Union. He put oil and gas under state control and saved Russia's economy. He's a good friend of Cuba. They just built a statue of Fidel Castro in Moscow. Good friend of Venezuela. Good friend of China. Good friend of North Korea. He's sent the military in to protect the peoples of Donbass from the U.S.-backed NATO regime. Putin is anti-imperialist. He is Mr. Anti-imperialism, right? He is the guy who's doing anti-imperialism more than anybody right now. It was an honor to speak to him, to be in the same room as him, because he's doing anti-imperialism, and he's damn good at it. And he's been doing it for a long time. And they've done everything they can to try and remove him, to try and prevent him from doing it. And he's doing anti-imperialism. He's holding Russia together. He's building the BRICS alliance. He's keeping different countries aligned with each other. He's building a new economy. Yes, he is very, very much an anti-imperialist. You betcha. You betcha. So on that note, I am going to put on the closing music. I'll be back maybe tomorrow night, definitely Sunday night. So there we go.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.